What's going on, guys? Army-Firedawg is back again. How have y'all been? Today I finally have, after 2 weeks, the review time for you of the successor to a legendary headphone I'm sure many of you have heard, maybe not have heard personally, but have at least heard of. And I'm of course talking about the Hifiman HE-6se. This is their, like I said, newest revision. It's a successor to the original HE-6. They've kept the same inefficiency, but the same performance. They've just updated the padding and overall design. Now, to disclaim before I go into the review, like I said in the previous one, I have never personally heard or even seen in person the original, so all my impressions will be on just the HE-6se itself. But of course, like always, I like to start with the construction, and then I'll work my way down from there. So the construction of the Hifiman HE-6se is actually quite impressive. The headband is not only detachable, so in case this breaks or bends, you can buy another headband itself from Hifiman. So I do like that aspect. It's very user-friendly, so you could do it yourself without having to send it into Hifiman themselves and pay that expense. But, anywho, getting them back on track, it is all aluminum, from the cup connectors right here, all the way up to the top of the headband. You do have a split headband here, and then back down to the other side. Now, as you see right here, and this is my first negative, is there is no side-to-side adjustment. So, why I do not like that is when you have yours on your head, and regardless if I have my glasses on or not, it's going to have a little bit of space right here. Like I said, I'll even take my glasses off, and there's still that space right there. It never makes full contact with my head. Now, and it's kind of a brief touch to the next section, but that never affected the comfort of these headphones at all. Like, I never had any issues with comfort, but I will talk about that very soon. Anyway, getting back on track, the lack of side-to-side movement, it's just one of them. I wish it would have got a good seal, so that may have affected the sound, which I'll get into later. The HE-6se does, thankfully, utilize detachable cables. They use two 3.5 millimeters in each ear cup, and in the cable that comes with it is terminated in a balance connector, but Hifiman does include a balance to unbalance adapter. I do like that. That's the first headphone I've personally seen with that feature. The pads are wonderfully soft. They are a hybrid between leather and cloth, so you get that firmness and stiffness of leather with just about right a give, but maintaining the breathability of cloth. I do like that. I mean, that was a wonderful inclusion. Now, the cable itself is, as you can see in the picture right here, it's kind of a tubular design, and it's transparent. Cable design I've never personally seen, and I'm kind of indifferent about it. I do like the appearance of a shielded cable. I don't know if that really affects the sound either way, but I just personally like the appearance of it. But again, I am indifferent towards this tubular design that Hifiman implemented with their HE-6se. I do not know if they've done that for any other headphone. It's the first one I have seen and played with them myself. Now, moving down to the comfort. And the comfort is surprisingly wonderful, like very, very good. The longest duration I have had in one time, I think in my written review I put either 5 or 6 hours, but that was definitely beat yesterday when I was working on my written review, which I don't know why this took me so long to do, but I was working on this review for just south of 7 hours. And I had these on my head just about the entire time, minus a bathroom break or two. So I never had to adjust them. My ears never got overheated. They never started sweating. My head itself never got uncomfortable. So despite the size of these headphones, and they're not that small, they are really, really comfortable. Like these pads, and even though this headband itself doesn't have any padding per se, maybe it's the size of it. It's very, very wide. But my shorter hair never got irritated, my head never got irritated. I just really have nothing negative to say about the HE-6se's comfort. They're wonderful. They even, before I go on next, the cups even fit my rather large ears. So that's definitely a huge note, and I'm personally very glad for that. Now, moving on to what y'all care probably the most about, and that is the sound quality. So, how does the Hifiman HE-6se's sound? The overall sound of the HE-6se's are that of a very finessed line between an analytical style type of sound and a musical one. It's that really fine line that I really personally can't really decide which one it is. I'm not quite sure. It's a very fine line and I can't decide. So, the full overall sound characteristics is incredible, with a caveat. These need power. I cannot stress that enough. Hifiman on the website claims they need a minimum of 2 watts per channel, and I will say that is a very conservative minimum, because the difference between using 2 to 3 or anything less than 5 watts per channel on these is a very notable difference in performance. And I'm not talking about, sure, crank it up to as high as the volume can go where it gets just loud, but the difference between going from a shit Ragnarok to a shit Mjolnir, which is 10 to 5, and then the Sennheiser HDVD 800, which I don't think that's even a single watt per channel. I'm not sure, they never release specs. And to an Audio-Technica amp. I've tried several different products at the audio meet, CanFest 7, and it just when you go from not a power behemoth getting fed into these, and then a power behemoth like the shit Ragnarok, the difference in performance is very notable, and that is to say the very least. So for review purposes, I maintained the shit Ragnarok during the entirety. I digress, kind of went off a little bit. But the sound is very, very, very finessed. So the soundstage positioning is definitely top notch. Like, dear goodness, if you listen to a well-recorded live orchestral piece or anything with several moving pieces, you know how far back something is in the soundstage, you know where in the orchestral line they are, you know where the singer is. The imaging, especially, like, you almost don't have a choice. When you have these on and you're actually listening to your music, they about force you to close your eyes. It is something that you really have to experience yourself. It is incredible with certain genres of music, which I'll of course touch on here in a minute. But the bass control, the bass impact, the minimal, if any, decay, the attack of the bass, just the quantity and quality of the bass is wonderful. So for metal music, right here, oh man, these are fun to listen to. Because you get, now I wouldn't recommend these for like a super bass head, so if you want super pounding bass, yeah, maybe not. The HE-6s may not be there. For me personally, they had more than enough bass than I would ever personally need, but I'm not a bass head. I've never claimed to be. The sound does move me on to my second, and really only have the 2 negatives. First one being the no side-to-side adjustment, and this one is the second. There is a very notable dip in the upper mid-range, and quickly followed by a sharp spike in the lower treble range. And this is one of the very few times I've actually included a frequency response chart, which of course will be linked in my description down below or be posted right here. And it just goes, upper mids and then straight up into a sharp peak on the lower treble. That does make for a rough transition, and there's a few songs, I list a few in my written review, of course, linked in the description box down below. Female vocals is a horrible culprit of this. Whether you listen to a personal favorite artist of mine, Utada Hikaru, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, or Adele, I'm sure many of you know Adele. Them two artists, that they go on the upper mid-range, and then their transitioning instruments are quite often in the treble, lower treble to mid-treble range. So that dip makes these sometimes fairly rough and then just not full sounding. Now, let me move on to the more individual aspects, so hopefully I can describe these headphones a little bit better than what I have. So of course, starting with the treble, and then I work my way down from there. Now, I already talked about the lower treble spike coming straight off of the upper mid-range dip. So keeping that aside, I've already gone off on that. Once you are actually in the mid-trebles and up and higher, these perform so beautifully. I mean, the energy you get, whether you're listening to Lindsey Sterling or Samvel, I can't think of his last name, it's the violinist off of Yanni. I've of course linked 2 very good videos that portray what I'm talking about in my written review. But there's so much energy in these. The sparkle of instruments, the violin, cellos, flutes, trumpets is just beautiful. The resonance of the strings, the horns is just something that I have rarely heard as good as I have on the HE-6se's, and that is something I really cannot overestimate. Dear gosh, these have gorgeous treble when you're actually into the mid-treble and higher. Now, moving on to the mid-range. They are a very flat mid-range, as in the artist's vocals when you're actually in the mid-mids and lower. Again, the upper mids have that notable dip, but once you're in the mid-mids and lower, there's so much body and just texture in the vocals. Like if you're listening to Trace Adkins, if you're listening to Bucketheads, if you're listening to Chris Jones, you can almost feel the artist's breath on you as they're singing, and that is a very intimate experience that rivals, honestly, even that of my Oppo PM1s, which y'all know I love those. Those are my favorites, still to date, my personal favorite headphones of anything I've ever tried, regardless of price. These rival that, objectively speaking. Now, of course, I like a little bit more warmth, so I like a little bit more forwardness on the mids, but for being a true-to-life sound, again, I would have to say mainly for the male vocals, let me do that. For mainly male vocals, dear goodness, that is just the body, the realistic sound, and the resonance, and I'll use cellos or even guitars, are there just, I mean, you feel like you are, like Chris Jones. I strongly recommend you listen to some Chris Jones through these, but oh my goodness, it is something that is like you just sit back and you are impressed. So live music, well recorded live music, you've got to hear when well powered through the HE-6se's. Now moving down to the bass. The bass, I got nothing. They are from the upper bass to the lower bass. It is impactful, it is powerful, it is punchy, it is controlled, it's fast. It is what you would imagine all the benefits of a bass on a planar magnetic bass is right here. The bass goes deep, the sub bass is there. I mean, you can physically feel it course through you, especially if you're listening to heavy bass things like EDM or trap or dubstep, but just metal or hard rock, and the list goes on. Of course, I've linked several in my written review, linked in the description. But if you want control, if you want to really experience what a controlling headphone can sound like on the bass aspect, right here, I have nothing bad to say about the bass on the HE-6se's. They are just everything I could ever think positively to say in bass. You go deep, but you do not get overwhelmed. Now, to summarize my overall thoughts on the Hifiman HE-6se's is that, with the exception of the music that goes into the upper mid-range and lower treble range, they are so good when properly powered. They do require heavy power. So for those of you looking for a top tier headphone that can pretty much be a good catch-all, and straight honestly, it's a good catch-all headphone, please, and if you're thinking about the HE-6, please, I encourage you to ensure your amp can have the wattage that is needed for these things. Like I said, they're only 50 ohms of impedance, but as I said in my unboxing video, you have to look at more than the resistance. The sensitivity is only 83 decibels, I think 83.5. That is hardly nothing. I think I called in these are a speaker wearing a headphone disguise. And honestly, their performance is very reminiscent of such. So, getting back on, I swear I'm tangenting a lot. But unless you were in the upper mid-range and lower treble range, I think you will really be impressed with the HE-6. But if you are listening to music like female vocals, certain instrumentals, certain rock music that does go in that range, you will not like these headphones. Several people, myself included, when I was at the Carolina Catfest 7 audio meet, we were not impressed by that headphone because a lot of the music we were listening to, it fell in that range and just was not satisfactory. But other than that, wonderful, fantastic headphone. But anyway, guys, I hope my review has been helpful to you. If it has been, please hit me up and let me know in the comments down below. I absolutely enjoy talking to you, reading your impressions, hearing about products you've loved, what headphones have really blown you away. I do like hearing from you. You guys are awesome people, and whether you agree with me or not, I like to talk with you. I like engaging in that conversation. But anyway, guys, I've taken enough of your time. As always, my name is Army-Firedawg. It has truly, truly been a pleasure, my friends. But most importantly, and please I ask, stay safe.